The last words my father-in-law said to me in court still echo in my head. "You'll never see your son again. Not while I'm alive." And the worst part? He was the judge, the man sitting behind the bench, hammer in hand, destroying my life with every sentence. My name is Evan Parker. 37, and 3 years ago, I lost everything: my marriage, my home, and my little boy, all because I married into the wrong family. When I first met Lydia, she was light and laughter and soft-spoken grace. We met at a charity event downtown, and she told me she was studying law, following in her father's footsteps. I thought it was impressive. I had no idea what kind of man her father really was. Judge Raymond Kohler, legend in the state's judicial system, known for his unshakable sense of justice. But justice was only a word to him. Power was what he loved. And when Lydia told him she was marrying a mechanic, someone beneath their family's status, he made sure I knew I wasn't welcome. The first few years of our marriage were good. At least when it was just us and our son, Mason. Lydia would visit her parents on weekends. I stayed home and worked extra hours at the shop to make ends meet. But things changed the day her father retired from the bench and moved closer. Suddenly, Lydia started talking like him, distant, cold, measuring every word. When I found out she'd been meeting her father's old law clerk behind my back, I didn't want to believe it. I begged her to tell me it wasn't true. She just stared at me, eyes flat, and said, "Dad was right about you. You're nothing but a distraction." The divorce hit fast and brutal. I thought it would be fair. I thought no one man could manipulate the system that much. But I was wrong. Her father pulled every string. He used his influence to get her the best lawyers in the state, judges who owed him favors, friends in high places. I walked into that courtroom with truth and walked out with nothing. No custody, no visitation, just a pile of debts from legal fees and a restraining order that said I couldn't be within 300 feet of my son. Lydia didn't even look at me as she walked out of the courtroom, holding Mason's hand. Her father smiled as if he'd just won another case. That night, I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the walls. Everything was gone. Everyone I loved was gone. But a month later, I got a letter in the mail, no return address. Just my name scrawled in handwriting I recognized instantly. It was my mother's. She'd been dead for 6 years. I must have stared at that envelope for an hour before opening it. My mum had passed away from cancer 6 years earlier. But there it was, her handwriting, looping and careful. Exactly how I remembered it from every birthday card she ever wrote. Inside was a single folded letter and an old key taped to the bottom corner. The paper smelled faintly like her favorite perfume, lavender, and something warm, familiar. "Evan," it began, "if you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to tell you everything before I died. I kept a secret from you, one I thought I'd take to my grave. But you deserve to know now, especially if life ever turns dark." My chest tightened. I read the next line twice just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. "The man you call your father wasn't the man who raised you. Your real father's name was Raymond Cole." I froze. No, it couldn't be. Judge Raymond Cole, my ex-father-in-law, same man who had torn my world apart. The man who called me unfit, unworthy, and a disgrace to his daughter. My hands went numb. I kept reading. "He didn't know about you. We were young. I was a court clerk then. When I found out I was pregnant, he was already engaged to Lydia's mother. I never told him. I wanted to protect you from that world, but I've left something behind that will explain everything. The key belongs to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside is proof." My mind was spinning. Proof of what? That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing Raymond's smug smile in that courtroom, hearing his voice echoing, "You'll never see your son again." He didn't even know I was his son. The next morning, I drove straight to First National Bank. The clerk looked up the box number, asked for ID, and then disappeared into the back. When she returned, she handed me a small metal box. My name was written on a yellowed envelope taped to the top. Inside were 2 things: a birth certificate with Raymond Cole listed as the father, and a stack of old photos, my mother and him together, laughing in a way I'd never seen either of them before. In one of the pictures, they were standing in front of a courthouse, arms around each other, like a couple with nothing to hide, and at the bottom of the box was a sealed legal document. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a will, dated nearly 20 years ago, and right there, in black ink, was the line that changed everything. In the event of my death, all personal assets, including the Cole family trust, shall be equally divided between my acknowledged children and any unacknowledged heir proven by blood. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. I wasn't just his hidden son. I was his rightful heir. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since losing my son Hope. The will in that deposit box wasn't just paper, it was leverage, proof that Judge Raymond Cole had more than one heir and that meant his spotless reputation was built on a lie. Still, I couldn't just walk into his mansion and wave it around. He was powerful, connected, and ruthless. If he found out what I knew before I was ready, he'd bury me again this time. It wouldn't be in a courtroom, so I made copies of everything and hid the originals. Then, I called someone who might help me, Claire Jennings, an investigative journalist I'd met years ago when I fixed her car. She owed me a favor. When I showed her the documents, her eyes widened. "Evan, if this is real, you're sitting on a political bomb," she said. "Cole's legacy funds half the judges in this state. If this gets out, it'll destroy him and anyone tied to him." That night, Claire ran background checks, traced legal records, and confirmed everything. The trust fund still existed millions of dollars untouched, waiting for eligible heirs. But there was something strange. The will had been quietly amended 5 years ago. Right after my mother died, the new version removed the clause about unacknowledged heirs entirely. Cole had covered his tracks. It meant one thing: he knew. He must have found out about me after my mother's death and buried every trace of it. Claire leaned back, her voice low. "He's not just protecting money, Evan. He's protecting a legacy. If the world finds out he fathered a child out of wedlock, everything he built crumbles." I looked at her. Then maybe it's time he lost everything. The next day, I went to the courthouse, the same one where I'd lost my son, and filed a petition to reopen my divorce case. Citing new information, I attached one of the copies of the will and a request for a paternity test. By the time I got home, there was a black car parked outside my building. The windows were tinted. My stomach dropped. When I opened my apartment door, it was unlocked. Everything inside ripped apart, papers scattered, drawers emptied. The deposit box documents were gone. Only one thing was left on the kitchen table: single photos of my son, Mason, taken at Lydia's house. On the back, in neat handwriting, were 5 words: "Stop digging, or lose him." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. That night, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was a warrant. My son was now the target. I stared at the photo of Mason for hours, my hands trembling. The handwriting on the back wasn't my ex-wife's. It was Judge Cole's. He'd found out. Somehow, he knew I'd opened the box. That night, I sat in my car, across from his mansion, headlights off, watching the place like a man possessed. Through the tall iron gates, I could see him inside, standing near a window, whiskey glass in hand, calm as ever. Like he hadn't just threatened me with my own son. I called Lydia's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't trust her anymore. If she was still under her father's control, warning her could put Mason in even more danger. The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. A woman's voice came through, low and nervous. "Mr. Parker. My name is Laura Chen. I used to work for Judge Cole. I think we need to meet." We met in a diner off the interstate. Laura looked exhausted, glancing at every shadow like someone being followed. "I was his assistant for 8 years, she said. When your mother died, he found her name in an old archive file. That's when everything started. He paid people to destroy documents linking them. Why? I asked. She looked me dead in the eye. Because he wanted to make sure no one could ever prove you existed. But your mother was smart, she hid copies, and she gave one to someone else. I leaned in. Who? She hesitated. Your mother's attorney, Thomas Green, but he disappeared 2 years ago. The rumor was he fled the country after a bribery charge, but I think Cole made sure he couldn't talk. Before I could reply, Laura's gaze shifted over my shoulder. A black SUV had pulled into the diner lot, the same one that had been outside my apartment. Her voice broke. He found me. I stood up. Go out the back now. We ran out the side door, through the alley. I could hear footsteps behind us, heavy and fast. I shoved her into my car, started the engine, and peeled out of the lot. For the next 10 miles, that SUV stayed right on our tail. Finally, I turned off onto an old service road that led to the industrial docks. When I looked in the mirror again, the SUV was gone. Laura was shaking. He won't stop, Evan. He's scared, because if that will and that blood test ever reach court, not only does he lose everything, but Lydia and Mason lose the fortune too. He'd rather erase you than admit the truth. I gripped the wheel tighter, the city lights fading behind us. Then he just made a mistake, I said quietly. Because I'm done running. I was going to bring him down, no matter what it took. For days, I barely slept. Laura was hiding in a motel under a fake name, terrified that Cole's people would find her. I kept copies of every document locked in a safe at a friend's auto shop, and I spent every waking moment piecing together the last thing my mother ever wanted me to uncover the truth. The answer came from a place I least expected. Claire, the journalist who'd helped me before, called. Her voice buzzed with urgency. Evan, I traced your mother's attorney, Thomas Green. He didn't flee the country. He's in hospice, care terminal cancer. I think he wants to talk. I drove 3 hours to see him. Green was frail, barely breathing, but when I mentioned my mother's name, his eyes flickered with recognition. She said you'd come one day, he rasped. She told me, if Cole ever turned against you, I was to give you this. He handed me a small flash drive. Your mother recorded everything, meetings, confessions, even Cole admitting he falsified rulings for payoffs. It's all there. It's enough to end him. That night, I sat in my car outside the hospice and plugged the drive into my laptop. I listened to the audio file, my mother's voice steady and clear despite the years that had passed. Raymond, you can't hide this forever. If you try to destroy Evan, I'll destroy you. I kept proof of everything. One day, he'll find it. Then came his voice, cold, arrogant, unmistakable. No one will believe him. By the time he learns the truth, I'll have taken everything he loves. That was the final nail in his coffin. The next morning, I sent copies of the recordings, the will, and the DNA proof to Claire and the state attorney's office. Then I drove to the courthouse where Cole still held advisory meetings with his old colleagues. When he saw me walk in, his face twisted with contempt. You just don't learn, do you, boy? He sneered. I dropped the flash drive on his desk. You should have learned to pick better enemies. He tried to stand, but the color drained from his face as federal agents poured through the doors. One of them nodded to me before reading him his rights. The look on his face as they cuffed him that was justice. Weeks later, Lydia called. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what he'd done, Evan. I swear I didn't. I know, I said, but now, Mason does too. He deserves the truth. Now, every other weekend, I get to see my son again. We spend hours fixing up cars and watching old home movies of the grandmother he never met's a woman who saved us both. Before she died, my mother hid one last note on that drive. It said, you can't fight darkness by hiding from it. You fight it by shining a light. And that's exactly what I did.